June Bauer, welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It was a pleasure to watch your presentation at the Bucks County Community College open house event that Greg Campese and Company ran this past November around the 11/11 timeframe. He hosts that every year, and you were speaking there. And unfortunately, because you were pressed for time, you didn't get to talk about all the ancient Egypt related things and non-ancient Egypt related things, for that matter, that you they usually talk about. So I'm going to give you the chance to talk about it in this show. We'll get 2 hours max. If for whatever reason you want to cut it short before 2 hours, just let me know. But I do want to go a full 2 hours and not more than 2 hours though, because people have lousy attention spans. So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself, maybe give a little bit of a life story explaining what you witnessed that caused you to feel that focusing on ancient Egypt is the lifestyle of choice to go, and then go from there, enlightening us on ancient Egypt and maybe in modern Egypt and anything else that you can enlighten us on. You got the floor, and I got my questions prepared.
Okay, great. The question of why Egypt. Egypt just kept coming back to me my entire life. As a young girl, I saw the ads for the Rosicrucian Order in the back of magazines and always wondered what that was, and the strange pyramid with the eye. Flash forward, any piece of jewelry anyone ever gave me was an Ankh or a Nefertiti head. And then I was in France and I fell in love for the first time in my life with a young Egyptian man. So it was kind of like pushed towards Egypt. And once I visited the country, it was overwhelming how beautiful and how much you are in awe. When you're there, just walking around, you're walking in a cafe that's 1,300 years old. You just realize how fast our life goes, how small this little experience is here, and how you have to get the most out of it. I came back a changed person. I was just like on fire to live life. I'm like, this is just, an incredible experience we have the opportunity to have here. It's very, very short. And from there, I started into the business of bringing the products here and learning more and more about the culture and the ancient religion. And from my clients, I started to learn more about the magic. Originally, I was just bringing in things because they were beautiful, and I loved beauty. We had beautiful Egyptian perfume bottles and the papyrus paintings and the colors and the way the jewelry looked. And within that, I built a huge business with the metaphysical stores, the occult stores. And I started to look at the different things that they were interested in and the different cultures that they also had in their stores. And that's really what brought my interest to the magical end of Egypt. And it's been quite a long and fun traveling experience from 1996 to today.
Cool. So, getting to this packet that you gave out to everybody at that event at Bucks County Community College, there was 42 ideals of Mott paper. And there was also part 1, Introduction to Ancient Egypt, and then you spread all the way to part 11, Hika Magic. I'm assuming that's the other parts you didn't have time to do, and those were the ones that you wanted to talk about. So, well, let's start off with these 42 ideals of Mod. I don't think it's in your best interest to read them all because we're pressed for time and all. And if you can maybe show any links that you know out there. Can anybody just find these on any site?
They can Google it. They can Google it and it will pop right up. 42 Ideals of Mott is something that's pretty standard as far as a document that will pop up. And it basically goes over, okay, the ancient Egyptians, the core of their religious belief was that at a certain point in time, you would have to answer for what you did here on earth. And that would determine what your afterlife was going to be. So you would stand at a scale, just the way that our justice system has a scale. You stand at a scale. And there, Thoth and Anubis, which are two of their gods, and you would be there. They would take a feather and put it on one side of the scale, and they would take your soul and weigh it on the other side. Now, if you were heavier than the feather, and the feather represented these 42 ideals of Mott, which was what they believed was the correct way, the best way of living. If your soul and you're epitomized by your heart was heavier than that feather, then you were eaten by this like grotesque monster. If not, you had a chance to be reincarnated because you had a good heart, you had abided by the rules, and you wanted to come back here on the earth plane. And a lot of their preparation and everything was to get you back here on the earth's plane. They took your organs from you and they preserved them in different jars. They wrapped the body so that the body would be able to come back. They also, after they wrapped it, they actually have what's called the opening of the mouth ceremony, where they take an ankh and they open the mouth and the nose, the nostrils of the deceased person so that they can eat and they can breathe when they come back. And they believe that that's very important and they're going to need those functions. So in a strange way, they believe that this physical body that we have now, if it was preserved correctly, you would get a chance to come back into it and use it again. I'm not really sure where they got that idea from, because they're the only culture that really, really believed that you would be using the body. Some cultures, they had reverence for it, but to actually come back and use it again, the Egyptians, I think, were the first to do that and to take the steps, as in preserving the organs individually, to make that happen.
Thank you, thank you. Switching gears for a moment here for secrets of Nefertiti, of all the Egyptian gods, goddesses, characters, pharaohs, pharaohesses, what were they you could have picked? You picked Nefertiti. She was the wife of Akhenaten, I believe, or was that Ramses? No, Ramses is Nefertari, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
you know,
Nefertiti is Akhenaten's wife. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm sure that Akhenaten maybe played a role in some of this, because if anything, it would have been more cool, I think, for lack of a better word, to call it Secrets of Akhenaten, because Akhenaten has so many mysteries and is so misunderstood and not even clear on whether or not he was the bad guy in his time, or whether, according to people like George Kavasilis, who asserts that Akhenaten was a benevolent Anunnaki, it was the priestly class who was the bad guys, who were trying to ruin everything, and Akhenaten was really, and his wife Nefertiti were trying to undo the bad things of the priestly caste and do the good things for ancient Egypt to enhance its well-being. So why Nefertiti, and are you familiar with this whole stuff about Akhenaten? Why don't you give your take on him and maybe clear up some of the things that are misunderstood about him, if you can?
I look at them as a couple that wanted to simplify the pantheon and look towards God in the way that the Christian, Muslim, and Judaism does today, as one entity, as opposed to a pantheon. They changed the premier god, which was Amun, to Atun, and in doing that, they put the emphasis of the sun on Atun, and that was the only form of creation and the only thing that one should worship. That was the major difference between the pantheon way of worshiping and their way. Also, the temples, a lot of money was put into the upkeep of the temples. All the different temples, they had their sacrifices. Their priest would go in the morning each day and they would give their sacrifices, their prayers, and it was a whole structure that surrounded the temples for the different gods all over the country. What they believed was that if they, both Nefertiti and Akhenaten, went early in the morning and gave their prayers for the people, that would ensure that the sun would make its rounds and that the river, of course, would overflow when it was supposed to, and that life would continue in the way that it was supposed to, and that all these other temples and all these other gods were not really necessary. However, they did make themselves extremely necessary. It was their prayers, and there's a painting, a papyrus painting, where you see the ball of the sun, and it has many different hands coming down from it, as this is the Atan reaching down to us, and it's a beautiful, beautiful painting. You see Akhenaten, you see Nefertiti, and then you see a couple other people there that are behind them, supporting them in worshiping in the morning the Atan, which was Aman, let's say a week before they made the decision to do this. So that's basically how I see them. I don't think the priests were good or bad. They were just a grouping of people that had a job, a function of lighting the incense and giving the sacrifices. And of course, they got paid for that. And, that was their job. So when you take that away, now they don't have a job. So it's, you have to look at it from that perspective, that of course, they were angry because their whole world revolved around their importance in the community and their job of taking care of these temples all over the place. Now you simplify it to one God, and a lot of people are out of work. So, I mean, that's how I actually see it. I see it as a much more practical way, that it just disrupted the social structure as it was prior to them making the decision that it was better to worship one God and that they would lead those prayers.
Thank you. I've never really heard it put that way, that the priestly caste, because they were out of a job, they had to do something. So, okay. But about the symbology that we look at throughout ancient Egypt, it seems like that ball, sphere, whatever we see, a lot of people look at that, and based on the different research people have done, you have to ask, well, what is that thing? Some would say, well, it's the sun that we see in the sky. What else would it be? Well, Zechariah Sitchin followers would assert that it represents Nibiru. I have read Zechariah Sitchin's book, Stairway to Heaven, his second book, Earth Chronicles, and according to Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartz's that book, and also Sitchin's first and third book are extremely accurate. Sitchin's fourth book onward, according to Leo Zagami, have been compromised because Sitchin was fed bad information by forces that saw him as a threat. Make of that whatever you will. But aside from Nibiru, the sun, the David Talbot followers, and I do seem to recall mentioning this during your presentation in Bucks County Community College, would assert that that symbol is the symbol for Saturn, and in the times of ancient Egypt, the sky was aligned in a completely different way. The stars and the planets were where Saturn was much, much closer to the point where it was basically a big sun, and you could actually see, for a time, Venus and Mars in front of it, with Mars being the closest, 3 planets in a row, and the crescent that you see around some symbols, some star symbols throughout the world, is said to be a crescent that formed around that Saturn structure, and that was said to be a time when Saturn also didn't have any rings around it, so it would have looked different. So have you studied the works of these other people, and do you have any comments at all about their assertions that Nibiru and or Saturn could be, and not the sun, is the ball or the disc or whatever that we see around ancient Egypt motifs?
It's possible. The first question is, how old is the Egyptian culture really? There's a couple different views on that, and there's a couple different views on whether or not information was stored there from Atlantis or from a base in Antarctica. Actually, there's a whole theory going back to right before World War II, where the Germans were sending people down to Antarctica, and one of the major, let me get his name here, because he was not only, okay, he is Jonathan Jacob von Leer, and he was prime minister over there in Egypt at one point under Nasser, and he was propaganda minister under Nasser, and he also was part of Germany, and he also was down in the Antarctica. And when you put all that together and you see all of the Nazis going to Argentina right after that, Argentina was the first one to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 bases down in Antarctica. So was there information in Antarctica? Was there information in this Atlanta that Plato speaks about that was somehow put into Egypt? We don't have a good timeline for Egypt. We just don't, because one group of people say the Sphinx is 12,000 years old. Another group of people try to say that it's 4,000 years old. So I think the first question is, how old are we? people have found human skulls that they say are 180,000 years old, and they are genetically the same humans that we are today. Is that true? The cataclysms, the deluges. It's just a very, very complicated situation. And I do believe that a lot of information is suppressed, again, because it's disruptive. Just like the priest, if you have one God now, you put them out of work. If you have a different take on how the world was really created, and how many times it may have been created, how many times it may have been destroyed, you're going to put some people out of work. And you're going to change some social structures, and you're going to really change some belief systems that are part and parcel of governments and of countries, that they just believe it's this way, and they predicate their decisions about their life and who they marry and where they work and everything else based on that the world works a certain way. So in answer to your question, is it possible? I've seen the pictures that you're talking about, and yes, I mean, it's more than possible. We have so much information that we don't know. And I think that's really the starting point, is to say that anything is possible, and let's review everything that we possibly can and dig further. And I think anytime that someone comes to the forefront with an idea about what's going on or how maybe it could have went on, it kind of gets suppressed and shut down, because the existing idea is what the society bases all their decisions on. And to disrupt that, of course, would be disruptive.
Yes, and excuse me, speaking about how Egypt is older than we're led to believe, um, there is a document that John Anthony West mentioned in Carmen Bolter's Pyramid Code documentary. When I had Carmen Bolter on the episode on my show, I asked her what that document that John Anthony West referenced, which actually says ancient Egypt is much older than mainstream archaeology and science tells us it is, and history tells us it is. I asked her what that documentary was, and I mean what that document was. And it's interesting. I re-listened to the re-interview I did with her. I think she said Turin Papyrus. I can't be sure, but it's like when she said, yeah, that document is and then there was like a brief like sound problem in the interview, almost as like some powers that be were interrupting with our interview to make sure that the information didn't come out. But there is a document out there that exists that says it's older than we're led to believe it is. And since you mentioned the Sphinx, I guess I might as well ask you, because coincidentally there was a video uploaded to YouTube yesterday that I saw on one of my subscription channels talking about the Sphinx and the riddles behind it, no pun intended. Sphinx and riddles are big, and it actually made the assertion that the body of the Sphinx was not a body of a lion. It was originally the body of a canine, to be specific, Anubis, the desert jackal god. George Cavasilis, he remembers having a past life in Egypt, where among other things he helped bring the pyramids to earth to anchor the energies of Orion. And he actually had, I've heard him say in at least one interview, that the Sphinx, it's been recarved over time with the current head that it has, but originally he asserts it was Anubis. And although Robert Schoch, the guy who's totally revolutionized the dating of the pyramid, when I spoke to Robert Schoch at the last Portal to Ascension conference in California, Schoch said he does not subscribe to the idea that the Sphinx was ever Anubis, and that it was recarved to have the head and altered to be a body of a lion and not the dog as it was canine as it was originally. So you said there's a lot of stuff we don't know, but is there stuff that you can probably deduce through this through studying the Sphinx, that maybe there is something to what these radical ideas about what the Sphinx was and what it was not?
Well, one of the things that John Anthony West had said, and he was over there between 1991 and 1993, is that when they used the machinery to see if there was any kind of tunnels or any kind of things under it, that he did find that. And there's writings that the Hall of Records that was in Atlantis got moved to Egypt. That's what I was saying, that there's a connection between Plato's time and Atlantis and the Hall of Records and Egypt. And there's also some sort of connection that really with the Antarctica, that if you look at Antarctica, look at the map. Well, first of all, there's no military bases allowed there, but they're scientific bases, and they're from all different countries. But the most, like 10 from Argentina, and then from Chile, and then from us, and then from Russia. So there was scientific information down there, and it all led back to Egypt. And it all kind of like started right around World War II, that this was discovered that there was information there. So these, I think, are the things that really need to come out. What is in Antarctica? Why or do all these countries have scientific bases down there? And nothing ever comes out about what they're studying down there. But if you look at the map, you'll see there's hundreds of them. And so what is there? And as far as the Hall of Records and digging underneath the Sphinx to see what is in there, they basically threw John Anthony West out after that one. They didn't want him touching anything anymore, and that was the end of that. And he was very interesting because he went over there many times, and he was searching. He was a kind of man that he was looking. And he didn't have an answer for everything. He wanted to just see. But again, the Egyptian government didn't want that much exploration. And the Egyptian government wants to keep the tourists coming, and, you have to let them buy their ticket and let them ride a camel and, like that, and be finished with it. They don't want too much disruption.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I mean, fair enough explaining that, but really not so fair when you talk about the authorities trying to shut people up and not get the truth out.
Well, absolutely. They told him his time was up and that he had to leave. His time for his expedition that he did was over, and he needed to leave. He did a seismic and geological survey, and after he collected whatever information he collected, he basically got kicked out of there. Now, the University of Arizona's website has the details of that survey, but they didn't really like him staying past that point.
Right. Have you done any research on Zahi Hawass, who, according to Carmen Bolter, one interviewer, he's not holding the position anymore? Does he actually hold any more positions regarding Egypt's antiquities? If he does, it would be good to get him the hell out of there, because she calls him Dr. No, and he obviously is not open-minded, or either that, or he's trying to he is in an agenda to cover up something. I watched some of the the Chasing Mummies episodes on the History Channel when they were on. He did not really come across as someone who wanted the truth and was open-minded. So, have you looked into him in any way? And as far as the people now who have basically taken his place, are they any more or less trustworthy?
I really don't know. My connection now with Egypt has a lot to do with trade, getting the products here into the United States. Most of my study is done from here in the United States, reading books, as I said, John Anthony West and others, and looking at some of the things that they've discovered. And when I go to Egypt, I'm basically talking to people about production of papyrus and jewelry and things like this. So I'm not sort of in where I would be exploring, or I'm not a writer, I'm not a journalist, so that's not where I go. My interest is more personal, to learn about this, and I take my cues from the people that are already here in America that have spent time over there studying these types of things.
Fair enough there. And but I gotta ask you about the pyramids, though, because when we talk about Egypt, everybody's talking about the pyramids. Coincidentally, I just a few days ago got in the mail from Robert Potter of The Promise Revealed the gold, copper, and silver plated pyramids that you wear on your head, and it looks kind of silly, some say, but I've actually tried them all, and they seem to have a nice effect. And now here I am talking about Egypt, just like pyramids with you. Well, as far as what the Great Pyramid and the other pyramids were and what they represent, I did mention George Cavassalis asserting that he remembers a past life of his where he and people from Orion came to plant the pyramid structures there to anchor the male energies of the constellation Orion, the male energy, dominant area of the cosmos. However, people are going to give different claims about what the pyramids represent. There's the Andrew Collins guy, the Cygnus lover, who makes the radical assertion that the three pyramids represent the stars in the constellation of Cygnus the Swan. And of course, regarding what the pyramids were, the Christopher Dunn guys say that the shafts pour hydrochloric acid solution down one shaft, hydrolyze zinc down another, and you produce and make a hydrogen power plant out of the pyramids. Then there's the Carmen Bolter people who talk about the pyramids being energy device beacons, shining different colors of things. Zachary Sitchin in his books actually said that the pyramids, I cannot believe they were created just for this. They wouldn't go through all the trouble to do something like this, but maybe they were used as this like a guide for incoming rockets and spacecraft to guide its way down to the Earth. The pyramids were used for that purpose. And regarding the dates, well, the Akashic Records say it must be true, I always say, and that's why I make Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartz, the Galactic Historian, my number one source. He did say in an interview I saw back in the day that the pyramids were built 803,000 years ago, and he mentioned something about how they were meant to intermingle, helping us get in touch with the dimension of time. And if that's the case, well, I would certainly subscribe to the idea that the pyramid would have been used for different purposes throughout the course of time, if that's what its intention was, to enable us to figure out different ways to use it throughout the course of time, if that's what he meant. So, okay, I've babbled long enough. What do you have to say about all this?
Well, the first thing is when you see the pyramids at night, there is a glow, and there's no reason for it. There's no city in back of them that should produce a glow. There's an actual glow around them, and it's pretty awe-inspiring. I mean, you just look at it, and it's like, wow, there's like a orangey yellow, and then sometimes there's like a pink glow. And you just look at it and go, wow, where is that coming from? Because there's nothing there for it to come from. My first time I ever went to Egypt, we arrived after customs and all the crazy stuff and everything. The first thing I wanted to see was the pyramids, and we went there at 2 o'clock in the morning. And the people who handle the camels, they live very close to where the mausoleums are and stuff. And, you know, I mean, hey, as long as you have money, they'll give you a camel at 2 o'clock in the morning. They don't care. But being out there at that hour and seeing that glowing light and just feeling that experience, you know that there's something very powerful there. Having said that, the research on the pyramids themselves, any pyramid, if you take a pyramid and you put a banana under it and you put a banana underneath a square box, the banana underneath the pyramid for some reason will stay more preserved. So I'm glad you got your pyramids to put on your head, because your brains will stay preserved. But seriously, the pyramid shape is something very unique in and of itself. And the different ways the angles are carved inside the pyramid, yes, they do reflect Orion's belt. The three are hooked up to the sky. And I think that if we've had a continuous civilization, let's pick a number, the 180,000 years of us humans, the way we are on this earth, if we've really been here that long, then there's been multiple cataclysms since then that has destroyed our records and our information. And that's why we don't have the information about our beginning, our origin, that we should have. If that's true, then being able to see the sky and connect to the sky and know when something was on its way here, when a comet was on its way here, when an asteroid was on its way here, when something was going to disturb life on Earth, would have probably been the most important thing that a culture could do. I mean, instead of building bombs to kill Russians or Chinese or something, you know, looking for when the next comet would be what they would rally their people to do. And that's pretty much what Egypt did. Slaves did not build the pyramid. The people that they have buried close to the pyramid, the ancient people that worked on it a couple thousand years ago, which might not have been when it was originally built, but the ones who worked on it a couple thousand years ago have evidence of brain surgery. They have evidence of dental work. They have evidence of their arms being repaired when they were broken. I don't know anyone that does those things for their slaves. So these were engineers. These were people in the public that worked for the government that built this thing. And I believe that what this thing was some way of knowing when activity was going to occur that we needed to know about. And I mean, that's my feeling about the pyramids, that they are a way either to connect with something that was up there, maybe a satellite. I mean, look, we have these things now. We have satellites now. If tomorrow morning we were hit with an asteroid, how much of this would be left? So they might have been connecting with other things that were placed up there, maybe a group of human beings that were up there on a satellite. I don't know. But I definitely feel that it is something very important. It's something that has to do with technology, and it was not made by slaves being whipped and whatever else you see on television.
Well, yeah, I can definitely go along with that idea. And unfortunately, the pyramids that I wear on my head, I can't wear them whenever I'm doing this radio show because they don't fit on my head when I have my headphones on. But I do keep them, one of them near me, the one I'm going to wear today, which is the copper-plated one. I've also got my other pyramid filled with crystals and all that I keep by me too, that I'm sure help me enhance this show to the best quality of that I can make it. So, with that being said, some other things about Egypt. Okay, the work of Robert Bouval. You know, his work is always going to come up. He's very big on the Orion mystery thing. And I mentioned the pyramids. Well, George Cavazos would probably agree with that too, because he said it represents the anchoring over the Orion male energies. The pyramids do. Of course, when you hear someone like Andrew Bartz say the pyramids were built 800, 3,000 years ago, I mean, I would think Robert Bouval would his eyes would pop at hearing that, thinking, well, that doesn't really resonate with my theory that the pyramids and the Sphinx, which he says was meant to model after the constellation Leo, would be in the alignment that you can see in 10,500 BC. I mean, then again, is it possible that if the pyramids were built long, long before then, did the people somehow know through the cycles of time factor and looking at the future that maybe in 10,500 BC the pyramids would be aligned that way, and that's the way just so it would be aligned, so Robert Bauer doesn't have to worry about the dating, like flying in the face of his date of the pyramid and the Sphinx aligning with and the Nile River aligning with the stars. Then again, there's, like I said, other people saying the pyramids represent different things, like Andrew Collins with the whole Cygnus thing, and Lisa Renee, she went as far as saying that the pyramids represent the three stars in the Sirius star system. She's the only person I know of who would actually say something like that. But of course, Sirius being such a prominent star in the Egyptians' history, you would think, well, you can't possibly dismiss that as being too crazy now, can you? So, any comments on Robert Bouval and Collins or Renee's work, and how some of the other people's work flies in the face of them?
I think the biggest problem is really setting a date for how long Egypt as we know it. I know there's a lot of cataclysms around the date of 11,000, around 12,000 to 11,000 years ago, and a lot of earth changes. And yes, I know about the Leo constellation and the Sphinx looking towards Leo. The Egyptians are kind of incredible in the fact that they were the first ones that discovered the precession of the equinoxes and how, you know, to use that for their agriculture and everything. I think that area of the world has been there. I mean, in so much as that things were preserved there and things, you know, from other parts when these cataclysms happened wound up there as a depository. But to know how long, it's really hard. I mean, it's really, really hard because if the evidence is out there, no one's really giving it to us in a way where we can carbon date it and say, okay, here's the human. The human is 800,000 years old. Maybe we weren't even the things that were here 800,000 years ago. I mean, dinosaurs aren't here anymore. I don't know what was here 800,000 years ago. And I don't think we're going to find out anytime soon from the scientists because they've never discovered a human part that they wanted to disclose at that level. The oldest that we've been dated at is 180,000. So I don't know.
Thank you. Now, using some of the things here on your secretsofnefertiti.com website under the Magic of Egypt tab, Gods and Goddesses, and the only sub tab there is Hathor. Well, it's on your site, so I might as well talk about this. Why don't you regurgitate the stuff that you wrote here on the site, and for that matter, all the other things that aren't on the site that you think are worth talking about, and also, I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say things like radical things like Jesus Christ is the same thing as Horus. Well, is Hathor the same thing as other figures in different mythologies and religions around the world? And if so, how can you tell what are the likenesses between those entities if you want to talk about that? So anything and everything you know about Hathor, you got the floor.
Okay, great. The Amun Ra, not the Atan, but the Amun Ra that is the part of the pantheon. And in his creation story, he basically created Shu and Tefnut, which is the god of air and the goddess of moisture. They're his first two children. He himself is self-generated. When he created his first two children, the world was not really created yet. One's air, one's moisture. So they kind of like were looking around to what to do with this because it was nothing. It was formless. And they got lost. And he got very, very, very worried. So he wanted to go look for them, but he was the epitome of order. Because the original beginning in the Egyptian pantheon is Nun, which is just chaos, darkness, and boundless energy. Ammon is the first sense of order. So once he becomes the first sense of order, he creates these children, the children disappear. If he leaves to look for them, then order will disappear. So he stays in place, he takes out his eye, and he sends his eye to go and look for his first two children. When the eye comes back, he names it a child. He names it Hathor. Again, he will take the eye out later on in the mythologies, but Hathor is his first creation beyond Shu and Tefnut. Hathor also transcends into Sekhmet, and then sometimes just the Eye of Ra, which is a protection symbol that's used all over Egypt. The Hathor part of Ra is the mother instinct, the one that went and looked for the children, the one that cares, the one that's going to be proactive in finding the kids and taking care of the kids. Sekhmet is not that lady. Sekhmet is a whole different goddess that he creates from Hathor at another point in time when the humans are misbehaving. And that's a whole separate story. But Hathor is basically created to take care of the children, Shu and Tefnut, bring them back and start the world. And that's how they started it. When the children returned, Amun Ra was so happy that he cried a tear, and the tears are us. The tears are us human beings. And that's their creation story for us.
Interesting story. And in general, when we're talking about the ancient Egyptian gods and goddesses, I've heard Robert Duvall say that they were very big. The Egyptians were on the idea that their gods came from the stars. Well, do they mean stars like if you were to take a rocket ship hypothetically and fly it to the star Sirius and a planet there, you'd find the creatures that look like the gods of Egypt? Or are we talking, when we say stars, are they possibly talking about other dimensions? Or are we talking about both? And in the idea of whether or not these gods or goddesses were real flesh and blood creatures that through crazy science that we can't adequately imagine, they form themselves into these things with the heads of ibises and desert jackals and the bodies of humans? Or are they could it actually be that what's going on here is that the Archon control system that did control parts of ancient Egypt, or maybe all of ancient Egypt to some degree, did actually brainwash the people of Egypt into believing some sort of a phony religion, and these gods and goddesses of Egypt could, sadly, the idea may be, but hey, gotta entertain it, that the system of domination and control in antiquity did brainwash people into believing that these entities are real when in fact they're just made up mythological creatures, just like every religion is a mythology to some extent. It all depends on whether or not you believe it, which is a religion, and someone else believes it, that's a mythology. That's what Jordan Maxwell says is the difference between religion and mythology. So real gods that were from the stars or some other dimension that did exist, or just figments that the ancient Egyptians were suckered to believe it did exist by some archon control system that created phony religions throughout time. What's your take on this?
I would say there's a break off, and I'll try to explain where the break off occurs. Shu and Tefnet, okay, are you're talking about the air and the moisture together. Once they are back in order, okay, they create the earth, which is Geb, and the sky, which is Nut. She's a sky goddess. I think that these are the framework for the universe that we live in. I think these are genuine. You want to call them gods, you want to call them just what I said, moisture and air and earth and Milky Way. It doesn't make any difference. They're saying Nut is the Milky Way, Geb is the earth. And together, now you come into the pantheon that becomes the more human type gods where we're now there. It's a power structure. You have a very similar story to almost any other pantheon. You have Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, and Set. So you have two brothers that are going to go against each other, which is Osiris and Set, and it's over jealousy. Sound familiar? And you have Isis and you have Nephthys intervening in their particular ways. The story, the way it goes, is that Osiris is setting himself up as the king god of the world, and his brother Set doesn't like that very much. He wants to be king god of the world. So him, and this is an interesting number, 72 accomplices, 72 go and kill Osiris. They kill Osiris and they spread the pieces of his body all over the place. Isis is totally devastated. She goes to her sister, which is also Set's wife, but her sister, and the two of them decide they're going to find the pieces and they're going to put it back together. And they put him back together. Thoth, which is a god of wisdom, which is not part of this pantheon. He's self-created at the same time as Hathor. So he's part of the creation gods. He helps Isis with words of power to bring Osiris back to life, and the two of them have Horus, which is the child. So I think when you're talking about Jesus Christ and Horus, you're talking about Isis, the statue of Isis, with a Horus, which is a baby on her lap. And that this is the same statue you see in Madonna and Child. And it is, because it's art. It's a beautiful woman with long hair that's sitting on a chair, suckling her baby to her breast. This is artwork, and yes, it looks exactly like that. And when you get to this type of story with the two brothers against each other, one killing the other over jealousy, and the woman loving her husband and putting him back together, having a baby with him, this is not, I think, what the core part of the esoteric religion of Egypt was. This is the exoteric. This is what was in the temples, and today people still worship Isis. I mean, they've worshipped Isis ever since then. Isis is a moon goddess in a lot of places, and I mean, I don't know what to say. I think that's the cutoff line, where you go from Geb and Nut down to Isis, Osiris, Nephthys, and Set. And then the gods after that, again, they have their dominion over things. And much like in India, there's a god for everything. If you're having a problem, it's just like a saint, a god. You go to that particular one.
Thank you for for giving your take on that. And what else to talk about here? Okay. Egyptian magic, Magic of Egypt spell kits. You have purchase your magic kit option here, as well as instructions. Now, a lot of people, I'm sure there's some might see this and call you a witch and say don't listen to June Bauer. She's practicing witchcraft. It's not good. Well, they call me guilty because I recently bought some spell magic kits that I'm just started getting the hang of, and I cannot help but agree with Arthur C. Clarke when he says magic is indistinguishable from higher level technology, and vice versa. So the idea of magic kits. I guess your magic kits must be ancient Egyptian based, and these would have been magic kits that they practiced to some degree in Egypt. So why don't you enlighten us on these magic kits and how they work and what the instructions are and how much they cost? Make a sales pitch out of this, if you would.
Okay, okay. Well, there's two types. The first type is things that you want to bring into your life, which is your prosperity and your love kit, and they're connected to again the gods. You asked about planets. The gods did represent certain planets, certain aspects of life in Egypt. I'm talking more about the people. Not the real deep mysteries, but what the people believe, the everyday people that practiced Heka, that wanted to have a boyfriend or wanted to have a little bit more money or whatever. They associated the gods with particular planets. Horus, they associated with Jupiter, which was expansion. So if you wanted a little bit more money, you would work with the powers of Jupiter, expanding your wealth, expanding your connections, expanding your ability to create money. When you're working with love, you're working with Hathor. And my love kit is one that is a little bit different than what you would expect. Hathor is part and parcel of Venus, and Venus is the only planet that goes direct where the other ones are going the other way in their spheres. So Venus has a whole different take on the world. Venus is about giving, not getting. With Jupiter, you want to get more. With the other planet, Mercury, you're getting knowledge. Hathor and Venus is about giving. So my love kit is getting you focused on your worthiness and your selfhood as a person and what you really want to give to another person. It's not about running out and getting a good-looking girl or a handsome boy. It's about what you, as valuing yourself, and what are the things about you that are wonderful that you want to share with another person. And really centering, well, what are the things? I mean, you're a great mountain climber and you love to teach someone how to do that, or you give great massages and you just wish you had someone you could give a great massage to. What is it in you that you want to give? So that spell kit is pretty deep. It works with a mirror. It's not just the candle and the oil. It's 6 pages of instructions to really let you get to where you're clear on what are the things that you want to give, and then from there you can pursue the kind of people that would want the kind of things that you want to give. I mean, if you want to teach someone how to mountain climb, or you want to give a massage, you don't want someone that's not interested in those things. So the first part of that love kit is all about you as a person, and really loving and valuing yourself and saying, these are the great things about me. I want to give them to someone. That's how that spell works. The other 2 spells, the healing and the protection, again, are a lot of deep work about you. The protection is Saturn, and the healing is Sekhmet. And protection is about clearing out all the bad stuff in your life, because usually the things that are going to harm you are the things that are right there in front of you. It's introspective. It's really looking at yourself and saying, okay, this area of the house I've had 10 fights in, and his sweatshirt's still there, and every time I see it, I get angry. It's time to throw the sweatshirt out. The protection ritual is about cleaning out all of the yuck, all of the gook in your life, and starting over. And just really getting rid of all of those things that give you bad reminders, that give you bad energy, and just getting it out of your life, and just really focusing on starting a new beginning. Where the healing is even more complex, because you have to get the bad things out of you that you don't like. And we don't like to look at our shadow side. We don't like to look at the part of us that's maybe a little bit of a thief or perverted or whatever, but we are that. And when you don't look at the bad aspects of yourself, the part of you that will cheat, the part of you that will do this, you don't have a clear vision about where you're going in life, because you're lying to yourself. You're walking around pretending that you're someone that you're not. And that's okay, until you have to do something important, until you run into a problem. So the healing kit is about healing the inside of you. It's about healing those things that make you so insecure that you have to cheat in a business deal. The things that make you unable to assert yourself in a conversation, that you have to cheat on a spouse rather than tell them that you really don't like it when they pinch your nipples. And you'd be surprised how many people walk around and spend half of their life very unhappy because they don't deal with the inner things that are blocking them from getting the things that they want. So my spell kits are not woo-hoo doo-woo. They're set up for you to learn more about yourself. And the essence oils, I make them myself. And the candle, the instructions are there. It's a focal point. It's to make you focus on what you're doing. 2 of the spells you actually have to journal. So you're not going to get something where you say something 3 times, turn around, and all the money's going to fall through your ceiling. But they will put you in the right frame of mind to bring good things into your life. And like I said, I make you download the instructions only because they're 5 and 6 pages long. I can't put them in the packages. And it's the real inside of magic, and the real inside of magic is only one thing: the creation of the magician. If you're doing magic for any other reason than to make yourself the most incredible person that you can be and to share that with the world, you're going to wind up in a lot of trouble, and you'll have to go down that path, but it's not going to lead to a good place. True magic is becoming the best possible person you can be and sharing that with as many people as you can.
Cool. So now looking at some of these artworks, I noticed a couple of places on your site are password protected, so people would have to get an account there. I guess that's none of my business to know why that is.
That's wholesale. That's wholesale.
Okay.
I'd be happy to tell you. Yeah, the wholesale section is password protected because they're not paying tax. They're giving their what you call it, their ID, their reseller ID, and they're ordering a whole different quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, sorry. I thought I was on mute, but I was on mute, so okay. Anyhow, some of these photographs here and some of the images, the papyrus images and all. One that stands out here. Let's go over some of them. The one of the cat. I seem to recall hearing in a couple sources that the cats were very sacred animals to the ancient Egyptians. And let's kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I also heard one of a cat's favorite foods is also something that the ancient Egyptians would call sacred. Flat Earth poster boy Santos Bonacci, say what you want about his marbles being lost for believing the Earth is flat. He has also asserted that the ancient Egyptians thought that fish were of another dimension, and they would not eat them. They thought the water world was another dimension. Fish were entities from another dimension, so that was one animal product that they would never eat. It's basically they thought of fish as a sacred animal, and cats, a lot of cats like to eat fish. That's the goddess Bast, it says here under the picture.
Yes.
I guess that would make if cats were treated like gods and kings in ancient Egypt, then makes sense that they would name a goddess after a cat goddess and make it look like a cat or whatever. So the idea that cats and or fish were sacred animals to the ancient Egyptians. Any comments on that?
Well, the cats and Sekhmet is a lion, and Bast is a black cat, and they both have to them protective qualities. Now they're different. Sekhmet is fire. She's of the sun. She's of the desert. She's going to burn away anything that's in her path that doesn't work well. The Bast is different. It's a loving kind of animal. It's a loving, protective animal. It protects pregnant mothers. It protects men from psychic attack. It has a different way of protection, where Sekhmet is just boom, beat it up, kill it, destroy it. Bast would like lay her body over the mother to protect the mother and the baby. It's just a different flow of energy within. They're both female goddesses, but they protect in different ways. And yes, the cats were very sacred. As far as the fish and the higher levels of magic, all magic, whether it's Egyptian magic or it's high levels of Hindu magic, you stop eating animals only for a couple of reasons. One is because they're at the time that they die, they give a lot of chemicals, fear chemicals, cortisol, things like that. When you ingest that, it becomes part of you. The other reason is that you don't unnecessarily harm another animal. And in that 42 precepts of Ma'at, you're really looking at, you're going now into the higher level of being where a priest or a priestess of the Egyptian pantheons would want to be, and they're not eating animals anymore. So as far as the fish, they are in the paintings in different places as being sacred, but you don't see them eating them. You see them on top and on the bottom. In Ramses, there's quite a few where they're up top and they're below him. They're kind of flowing. They're protecting him from above and from below. But in answer to your question about eating it, it would go that wouldn't be part of magical teachings in the higher levels of magic of Egypt.
Thank you, thank you. And something else that ancient Egyptians seem to be very big on was the divine feminine principle. Females were said to be very significant. It's like they understood that you have to balance out masculine and feminine qualities. However, Hatshepsut, she was, if females were loved and revered so much by ancient Egyptians because they understood the significance of females on Mother Earth, why would they force Hatshepsut to like wear a beard like Egyptian male pharaohs would sometimes wear, like a if they did have a beard, they would wear that, or they would have to wear not like a fake beard if they didn't have their own beard, I guess. But Egyptian women like Hatshepsut that made it to the pharaoh level would have to wear a beard. Well, that seems counterintuitive. If they valued females so much, they wouldn't force you wouldn't think they would force a female pharaoh to have to do something like that. So, does that make any sense to you, that of that contradiction? What would be the reasoning behind it? And if you can offer any more information about the why ancient Egyptians, how and why they understood the significance of the feminine. How do they gain that knowledge? How do they learn it? And how do they incorporate it? Can you elaborate on any of that?
Well, again, you have two levels of study. When you go into the higher level of study, the 7 Hermetic principles, the 7th one is the principle of gender, which clearly shows how everything is both male and female and how that interplay is so important. It mimics the yin and yang sign, where within anything feminine, there's the masculine components. Within anything masculine, you have the female components, and they work together to become a whole. But this is the higher level of teachings. When you're looking at what the common people wanted or whatever, a lot of times, and they even believe Nefertiti did this, that the king would die early or whatever, and they just would make the queen a king to just keep order. They say that Nefertiti was King Nefertiti for a while because Tutankhamun was so young. So if they wanted to show an image of a man standing in front of the people, to calm their fears that a tough man was taking care of things, that's why it was done. It's more a perception of the common people, not what the higher levels of Egypt magic or the higher levels within the priesthood would have believed.
Cool. And you just mentioned King Tutankhamun, also known as King Tut, was well, he was named pharaoh when he was 9, but I guess he really didn't know what he was doing, so they had to have like Nefertiti be act as his de facto replacement king queen. But you mentioned that, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, wait a minute. Do you have the answer to one of the mysteries of ancient Egypt that no one seems to know the definitive answer to, which was King Tutankhamun the son of Akhenaten, and vice versa? Was he the father of King Tut? This has actually been brought up in conversation in some Egypt programs I saw, and it seems like there are reasons why they can't definitively say yes, he is. Do you know any what those reasons are, or do you think maybe there is no reason to believe he's not? There's more than enough evidence to suggest that he is, even if it can't be proven. It's basically 99.9% certainty he is.
There,
Anyway,
there were questions that he might not have been the son of Nefertiti, only because the king had other wives. Now, Nefertiti was the number one wife, but every king back then had many different wives. And Nefertiti was Egyptian, and she was not his sister or anything. This wasn't a marriage to keep land together. So he had other marriages. I mean, they would get married, just so not to have a war. So there is a question whether or not King Tut was Nefertiti's, but I've never really seen good evidence that he was not Akhenaten's.
thank you for clarifying that. And now getting back to something else that many people seem to think represents the divine feminine, the Ankh symbol. I mean, some people that are obsessed with Zachariah Sitchin's work and the Anunnaki legends would say Ankh. It sounds like Anunnaki. That means it's an Anunnaki device or symbol. And I'm thinking, well, just because it sounds like that, you're taking it a little too far there. I mean, and others have asserted, well, look at it. What does that thing look just like? It looks like the symbol of female, the female symbol, the circle with the line out of it, with another line like making a cross out of the symbol that looks like an ankh, and then there's the male equivalent of that, which is a circle with a line, but instead of a line through the that's perpendicular to the line coming out of the circle, there's like the end of an arrow at the end of the line that comes out of the circle. That's the male symbol, but they don't have that in anything like that in Egypt. Apparently, they only have the ankh, which looks like a female symbol. And one has to also wonder if is the ankh shaped like that because it can be used as some sort of like an energy device. You can imagine someone holding the ankh in the circle part and pointing it at something, and if it has some sort of a power to it, then it can be used for that power. Or is it nothing more than just a feminine symbol?
Well,
What do you think?
it's a few things. As far as being a feminine symbol, if you look at it carefully, you can see a uterus, two fallopian tubes, and a canal to enter. So it is the female reproductive system. It's just that's what it looks like inside. Having said that, it is used in the opening of the mouth ceremony, and it also was used by Thoth to bring back Osiris. After Isis and her sister had found all the pieces and put them back together, the Ankh was used to bring him back to life. So there was something in it. There was some kind of energy in it where it was able to put the Ka, the life force, back into this dead body. And they do use it to make sure the mouth is open so that the pharaoh can eat after he's already been mummified. So they're definitely using it as a magical instrument, and it definitely is originally being the symbol of life. It's the uterus, and you have the fallopian tubes in the canal. What else do you need? That's where everything starts, inside there.
Fair enough. And looking at the judgment scene papyrus painting where you got the heart being weighed against the feather of truth, and if you pass the test, you go to heaven. If you don't pass the test, then a meat is going to gobble you up and use the heartbeat. So, but the interesting thing there, it's the heart that they're weighing, and when it comes to the body organs, why is it that the liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines are the ones that get put in the canopic jars and not any other organs? And why weigh the heart? Why not weigh the brain? Well, I can understand if they were all spiritual, they're going to weigh the heart. But why won't the brain be one of the organs that would get put in the canopic jars? It plays such a significant role in our being able to exist on this third dimension of consciousness. The brain does. Give it some credit for that. So why those organs?
It's a very good question about the brain. I never even thought about that. That's an excellent question. As far as the organs, they're preserved in the jar separately. The heart, after it's weighed, is put back into the body. And on top of it is placed a scarab. And the scarab is a strange animal it can live forever almost without water or food. So it's a symbol of eternal life. And they put the heart back in and they put the scarab over it to protect the heart. Apparently, when they bring the body back to life, it's necessary for the heart to be in there and to be intact and to have been protected. I'm not sure that it would be necessary for the other organs to be in there. They could be put in there later. But the heart has to be back inside that body. And how to preserve all of those organs within the body, I don't know because I don't know the exact steps in mummification. But I know once the heart's weighed and they put it back in and then they put a scarab over it, and then the sarcophagus would be sealed.
Thank you. And in his book, Stairway to Heaven, Zecharia Sitchin does actually give a very detailed description of what the Egyptians believe that everyone, not just the pharaohs, but also the everyday common person in Egypt, would have to go through in order, if they did pass the test, to be able to go to heaven. They would all go through some sort of a process of transition. Um, I know Katrina Andrew Bartz has said Sitchin's first three books are very accurate in terms of the events. So whether or not he was suggesting that Sitchin's description of the events that a being would go through when transitioning from Earth into the heavenly realms is an accurate description. Are you in any way familiar with that description I'm referencing that Sitchin puts in his work? And if so, can you perhaps elaborate on it?
I'm actually not. I look at the judgment scene from the perspective of the Rosicrucian order, and their real perspective is these 42 ideals of Ma'at, and really making sure that you're prepared and your heart is prepared to be accepted and to be accepted to continue on. A lot of the work that I look at is ways to live a better life and to live here a better life and to make sure that when you go on past here that whatever is left of you is pure enough and good enough that it deserves to be brought back. And that's the reason why the heart is weighed, because the real essence of a human being is, are you a good person? I mean, anyone can make stupid, dumb mistakes, and we do it every single day. All of us do. But at the bottom line is, are you a good person? Is the essence of you, is your heart good? If your heart's no good, then doing good deeds doesn't mean anything because you're doing them for a reason that's all self-centered and has nothing to do with giving. It has to do with what you're going to receive in return. So a lot of the teachings that I've looked at center more around the 42 ideals of Mott and how to incorporate them into your life. And they're not easy. I mean, they're not easy. They're really not. I mean, it's hard to catch yourself doing selfish things. I think we all do a lot of selfish things and thinking in a selfish way and perceiving things that way. It's tough. And so, a lot of my work has been pretty much on that.
Thank you. And when it comes to certain Egyptian poses, it's a motif you see in a lot of Egyptian artwork to have one leg standing in front of the other. I actually have a pair of Egyptian healing rods. There's several different types of Egyptian healing rods, ranging from like level 1 to level 7. I have the level 4 ones, the run-of-the-mill ones. Um, and they're copper and zinc rods made of with crystal inside them. Hold the copper one in your right hand. You can walk barefoot on a nature trail with them, which I like to do often. And another way that to do work with them is to stand at the direction of the sun, even if the sun's not out. It doesn't matter. You just stare in the direction of the sun with what your left leg half a step in front of your right leg. I think it's left. Yeah, it's left leg, and you have a slight smile on your face, squeeze the rods for 15 seconds before you loosen your grip on them, and hold the rods down at your sides for 9 to 18 minutes. Um, like the key significant thing there is the stance with the left leg half a step in front of the right leg is commonly seen in Egyptian paintings and artwork, and another, of course, common Egyptian pose, which was greatly popularized by the Bangles song from the mid '80s, "Walk Like an Egyptian," is the one where you put your arms in like a half swastika position and walk, shifting your arms like that. Well, is that a pose that they actually would do in ancient Egypt? And is that a pose, the walk like an Egyptian pose? Does that actually allow for energy to move through your body in some sort of better way? That's actually a good pose to put yourself in, so it's actually healthy to walk like an Egyptian. I guess you might ask. So, do you know anything about these Egyptian pose motifs?
There's quite a few more. There's a whole study on Egyptian yoga, and it's more in the workings. If you look up, instead of saying the word Egypt, if you look up the word Kemet, you'll see Kemetic yoga, you'll see Kemetic diet. And a lot of people have studied all the different papyruses and put together like a yoga routine almost from the different poses. And yes, it feels great. I mean, there's definitely energy. It's not exactly like the Indian yoga, but it strengthens your body. It puts you in touch with the sun. They're basically sun salutations, and in order to do the poses, you're going to need the flexibility and the strength and all the things you would need for the Indian yoga. So it's kind of interesting that they parallel with India, but the poses are a little bit different, and they're taken from the papyri. And like anyone who's really interested in it, there's a book. It's called Kemetic Yoga, and it is Egyptian yoga, but they use the word Kemet because that's the original name for Egypt. It's called the Black Land, and so Kemet means the black.
Thank you. Another image here that seems to be a common motif is the tree of life image, not tree of knowledge image, I should point out. Everybody in the metaphysics community seems to be very familiar with the tree of knowledge, with like the circles around the different points in that tree. But this is not that. This actually is a tree with leaves and birds on it. Well, when you hear tree of life, I believe in the Bible, the tree that Adam and Eve ate from was the tree of knowledge, but there is a tree of life. The Bible later references after that that was said to be in the Garden of Eden, but it was a different tree. Is that the tree, the same tree of life that in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis, the tree of life that is referenced in this picture here? And aside from that, can you compare and contrast the tree of life with the tree of knowledge?
Well, the tree that's in the picture is probably part of the Hermetic principles, and it's the as above, so below. When you look at a tree, the roots pretty much span the width and the depth of the height and the width up top. And part of the 7 Hermetic principles, the Greeks named it Hermetic, but it's the teachings of Thoth or Deudi, is as above, so below. This is the principle of correspondence. It's the second principle, and it's extremely important. And that tree, in the Egypt sense, is symbolizing the principle of correspondence, as above, so below. When you look at the trees of knowledge, and now you're headed over to Hermetic and Kabbalah and things like that, it starts to become a different study, and you're going back to the planets, because those little circles in the tree of knowledge, they're representing steps from the source to manifestation of creation, and they're also representing planets and planet influences on the way down to Earth, which is at the bottom. Malkuth is the manifestation, and you're starting at the top as Kether. That's a whole different study. That really doesn't have to do anything with the second principle of the Hermetic principles, which is the law of correspondence. There's a lot of information on the tree of knowledge, and I mean, there's Christian, there's Hermetic, there's Judaism, and there's some like Wiccan and Selkic types of things that have kind of had suggestions about the tree of knowledge. So That's my take on that. That particular tree you're looking at, though, is as above, so below.
Thank you. Now, when we talk about the gods and entities that played a role in Egypt, one that seems to be very significant, according to the work of Eric von Daniken, he was big on this. He something he mentions often regarding his ancient astronaut theory work and the Great Pyramids of Egypt. He mentions that they were built by an entity. He says the Egyptian texts claim this too, built with the aid of the instruction, the powers of some entity known as Saurit, and he then points out that Saurit is the same that the Hebrew community knows as Enoch, the great grandfather of Noah. And Enoch is, and Eric von Daniken did talk about this in some of his books too, and I talked about him as well in my interview with him for a little bit about how Enoch is said to be a direct human incarnate of the archangel Metatron, which would be is said to be the de facto big boss of the archangel group. So, do you know anything about this, and can you help make sense of all these connections? Enoch, Metatron, Great Pyramids, and human incarnates of the big boss archangel being Enoch, and all
Wait,
that.
wait, yeah. When you go off into angels and archangels and things like that, you lose me completely because that was not something that even ever interest me. Was an angel. I mean, it was just to me that it was something like pretty and fluffy like a fairy. It's not something I ever studied or even thought was interesting. When I got involved with Egypt and the gods and their correspondence to the planets and their part in creation, I became very interested in what they did to create and to manifest. And a lot of the Egyptian magic is based on manifesting, working with your mind. Mentalism is the first of the principles, and that is to clearly see what you want to occur, what you want to bring into form, and that's how things are first created. That's the spark of creation is mentalism. They actually says all is mind. So some of the things that you see in like the metaphysical world and whatever, I don't believe in at all because they're not really towards where I'm focusing, which is the Hermetic principles, the teachings of Mott, just more or less becoming the best I can be here using those principles in my life. And the Hermetic principles really teach you how this whole thing works. So you understand better when you go to do something what your effect is going to be before you make an action. You can see ahead of time what the effect is going to be from that action. And a lot of times people don't look at those kind of things. They don't even look at the mood that they're in when they do something, which is the third principle, which is the vibration. And it makes a very big difference. And that's, these are more the things that I work around personally, and I try to put into my business and the spell kits because I think that they're very valuable and very empowering, especially right now when a lot of people are pretty lost. When you talk to young people in their 20s, they're just all over the place with what they believe, and a lot of them say they don't believe in anything.
Yes, people are tired to believe what they want. I always say, if you don't believe what the evidence shows, you have no choice but to believe. That means you're stupid, and by that definition, a lot of people are stupid because they're wishful thinkers who can't handle the fearful truths. But I don't think there's really anything fearful about the truth that ancient Egypt's history is not what we're led to believe it is. And on that note, you say you're not really big on the metaphysical stuff regarding archangels and all, but what I can't help but ask about maybe a little more down to earth thing regarding flesh and blood extraterrestrials, like ancient astronaut theorists talk about. One thing they can't help but have a field day about regarding ancient Egypt is those hieroglyphs. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the pyramid or temple where they are, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. The hieroglyphs that look like a helicopter, a submarine, and some sort of UFO craft. You walk under them as you're going through some sort of doorway in some part of Egypt, and if anybody asks about them, they're basically told, shut up, don't even bother looking up there and wondering what those hieroglyphs are, keep moving, and don't bring them up any further. It's like a conspiracy to keep people from realizing that those really are hieroglyphs of high advanced technology that would fly in the face of our idea that ancient Egyptians were basically had nothing but hammers and chisels. So
No, I don't believe that at all. I think that ancient Egypt, they had a tremendous amount of technology. I really do. I mean, there was also a couple hieroglyphs that looked like someone looking at a computer screen, which is kind of interesting too. No, they absolutely had to have a whole different set of technology that we have not rediscovered yet. And whether or not it came from ancient aliens, or we traveled to them, or they traveled to us, I don't really know. But I know there are things, even the metal that the emerald tablets are on is different than anything that we know of. So there's definitely strange things that come from space. But whether we were up there and that pyramid was tracking us being up there, or something was coming down from there, again, we don't have the information. I do believe that there is something going on with Antarctica, though. There's just too many scientific bases down there, and everything surrounding World War II. You look at how our world has changed since 1920 to now, in 100 years. If you look at the lifestyle and the way people lived and the technology they had, and look at what we have now in just 100 years, we could have never expanded this much without something being found. And I think that maybe there was a map or some direction over in Egypt that sent people down to Antarctica, because I think there is stuff down there. And I don't know what kind of stuff, but I know that a lot of countries have invested a lot of money to stay down there in the bitter cold and not talk about what they do.
yes, well, some of other sources I've listened to assert that Atlantis, it was there was a large continent in the Atlantic Ocean that has since sunk. That was basically the de facto global headquarters of Atlantis, but Atlantis shouldn't be thought of as just existing on that continent. It was basically a global civilization with many different outposts, and that continent in the Atlantic was its de facto HQ. Um, but some people can't seem to agree or disagree on the extent to whether or not ancient Egypt was an Atlantis outpost. David Icke believes it was, but then what does David Icke know? And also, you mentioned Antarctica. Um, Brad Johnson, who channels Adronis, he has been very big on the fact that Antarctica was one of the biggest Atlantis outposts. For all intents and purposes, it could be Atlantis 2, simply because of its the continent's size being so big. But it's not as doesn't have as many Atlantis related things as Atlantis 1 would be, the continent in the Atlantic that doesn't exist anymore, but it was an outpost. A lot of the things there for Atlantis, and possibly Lemuria too. So, can you perhaps resonate with that idea, and what do you have to say about Egypt being an Atlantis outpost?
Well, I do believe that there are records there, because there's a reference that Herodotus, I want to say his name, had written about an underground library. And quite a few of the Greek philosophers believed that there was information there that was hidden, and they call it the Hall of Records. John Anthony West believes it's underneath the Sphinx. Wherever it is, I do believe that there is information there that we're not allowed to see, and it would be, again, disruptive. When you think about what they could possibly find, that means a lot of things in the world would change, and I think that's why it's kind of kept away. But yes, I do think there could be things from Atlantis, and I think there could be things from Atlantis down in Antarctica, because there's just too many things that don't make sense. They don't add up. From metals that we can't identify, to with all of our equipment not being able to even duplicate a pyramid. And some of the surgeries and things that mummies had, we didn't do that until a few years ago. During this period where I'm saying from 1920 to now. But 300 years ago, we could have never performed those surgeries. 300 years ago, we could have never done that dental work. So how were they doing that? And I think that we have rediscovered some of those hows. And I think that information came right around the time of World War II, where there was a real push in Egypt, in Antarctica, to find things.
Right. Now, the idea that the ancient Egyptians practiced magic to, among other things, create curses seems to have some basis in truth. Howard Carter would certainly uh, know all about that after he discovered the tomb of King Tut, among other things, his bird getting gobbled up by a snake and whatnot. But it has been asserted by many of my friends in the spiritual but not religious and metaphysics communities that, well, it is possible to put a curse on someone by virtue of the fact that energy flows where attention goes, and a person's belief causing a placebo effect of something manifesting into a genuine curse that you believe is to be real. So it's not magic, it's metaphysics. I know you said earlier you're not really big on trying to focus too much on metaphysics. But then again, if I'm sure that if this is believed in Egypt, I'm sure it's come across in your work, so I can't help but wonder what have you found regarding the ancient Egyptians placing curses or the related phenomenon hexes on people or places or things, and why would they do that if they could do that?
Well, okay, the first principle is all is mental. All is mental. That's the principle of mentalism, which means that you can use your mind to create. Your mind is something that is a creative force. Now, how much energy you put behind that, okay, has to do with manifestation. So if you're putting force, or a group of people are putting force into a specific situation, it then will pick up a vibration. Can that vibration physically do something? The answer is yes, it does make a difference. It makes a difference in the world. Using it as a curse, you could, but then again, when you're doing this work mentally, it's not just, and this is where the law of attraction falls apart. And not just you. You could sit there and wish for money all day long. There's other people that are thinking about things around you too. So you have a lot of mentalism. Everybody practices magic. Everyone practices magic. Whether you know it or not is a whole different story. And there's been some huge disasters when people practiced magic and didn't know it. When you put your focus and your concentration on something, that something is activated. Okay? So basically, if you're focusing on one thing and someone else is focusing on the same thing, someone else is focusing on the same thing, the likelihood of it getting done is great. If one person does it against another person, it's not as great. And there also are other factors. If you are putting a curse on someone that's really a rotten person, that a lot of people, they're not consciously cursing, but they're thinking, that SOB threw me out of my apartment. I was only a month late with the rent. That SOB ripped me off in a business deal. That SOB cheated on me when I was married to him. That SOB, that SOB. If you're putting a curse on that person, you already have a team all over the place that hate that woman or man or whatever. So the effect of the curse would be much, much, much stronger. And that's how they say, well, curses work or they don't work. They work if you and a lot of other people are concentrated on that. And the person themselves really, is not having people bringing good things into his or her life. If a person is really wonderful and honest and good and loved, and their kids love them and their spouse loves them and they're loved at work and everything, your curse isn't going to come up against that energy with any real force. It's not going to work. But if you're cursing someone that a lot of other people are cursing, even without lighting the candle and lighting the incense, they're just in their mind hating this person, your curse is going to work. And that goes for today. You don't have, that's what they call the evil eye. You don't have to light a candle. You don't have to put the incense. You don't have to do anything. When you're thinking negatively about someone, and a lot of other people are, usually sooner or later, the Chinese used to say, if you watch the river, sooner or later you will see the enemy, the body of your enemy float down the river. Because your enemy probably screwed over a lot of other people. And that's just the way that the energy flows. So yes, curses do work, but you can't really curse a wonderful, incredible person. It won't work.
Right, and I think it's also harder for curses to stay in existence and be created in the present day because Earth's vibrational energy has increased over time. One thing that I noticed as evidence of this that I did actually talk about in my interview with Brad Johnson when he was channeling Adronis was the phenomenon, nothing to do with ancient Egypt here, but it does have to do with curses, about how, interesting fact, ever since the Boston Red Sox in 2004 vanquished the curse of the Bambino by winning their first World Series since 1918, ever since then it's become almost a ritual for like every other sports season. Some team that's been victimized by some sort of a sports-related curse that prevents it from winning a championship has won a championship. So think of that whatever you will, but I see that maybe as a sign. Curses have to either be vanquished, and the things that can vanquish them have to happen, or they can't be recreated as easily on this planet anymore. So I guess that's a good sign. But moving on to some other things here. How fitting that I asked this question right after I lit a pipe of Mapacho tobacco to smoke. Smoking tobacco during these radio shows, they really help mellow the mood and also help me speak in two dimensions, which helps sheeple understand a lot of these far out crazy things I talk about on my show. Thank you, Andrew Bartzis, for pointing out the fact that tobacco does that. But the ancient Egyptians, they seem to have known a thing or two about tobacco's properties because, well, it's been found in the mummies, and so has cocaine, and people would have to think, how did that get there? Because the mummies, well, the ancient Egypt it's part of the world where there is no tobacco. Tobacco is a North America and South America product, as is cocaine, a South America product in the coca plant. So how could the Egyptians have gotten to South America? Well, some people have asserted they were great sailors. They could actually make a boat out of really sophisticated plant products, and with enough guts and glory, they could sail across the Atlantic and get those products. But others would assert no, they wouldn't. Even if they could do that in theory, that's not what happened. They actually probably had flying machines or teleportation devices, crazy as that may sound, that because they were such high level consciousness that we don't know about, but that's what they were. They had the ability to do that, and that's how they got to the Americas to get those products. What's your take on the truth behind why the cocaine and nicotine is found in the Egyptian mummies?
Well, there had to be contact because there are pyramids in South America. So there was definitely contact. How they got there, I mean, hey, look, they could have had, let's say, 30,000 years ago, they could have had the same society we have today, where we have airplanes and buses and trains. Because our society right now, if there was a cataclysmic event, would most of these things that we're using, even this computer, would be gone 30,000 years from now. I mean, no one would be able to trace how we got places and how we did things or anything. I mean, especially if America was in the bottom of the sea. I think that human beings could have been a lot more advanced, went down, came back up, went down, especially if we're 180,000 years old. We could have went up and down 2 or 3 or 4 times. And just the things that are left over, we thankfully we can find them here and there. But I think that definitely they could have met with South America. They had to have. They have the same step pyramid down there that they have in Egypt. How did they build that? Where did they? And there's pyramids in China also. So there was an interconnectedness around the world. There are these. They wouldn't be building the same exact type of structure and building it the same exact way. And the Chinese don't talk about their pyramids at all. And no one's ever gone to China to go view a pyramid. But they are there. You can look it up on the internet and you can see some pictures of them from, above. But you're not going to see any in-depth inside exploration of the Chinese pyramids. Just the same, they're there. So how did Egypt and China and South America have pyramids? They had contact. And that's how the mummies got cocaine. I mean, they went down to South America and they said, hey, this stuff is good, and they brought it home. That's what we do today. I don't think that, it's too different than if our life right now ended the way we know it and the next generation would have to pick up the pieces. How long would it take them to put back the technology we have right now, where we have robots doing heart surgery and we're sending spacecrafts to Mars? I think it would be quite some time if we were hit with an asteroid before we could be up to that level that we are right now.
Well, to be honest with you, there's no reason why Earth should get hit by an asteroid. I mean, anybody who is into the conspiracy theory realm would know that our death ray technology, which they keep from the general public is more than sufficient to justify any incoming asteroid heading for Earth. So, if an asteroid is heading for Earth, well, one of two things is going to happen. Either A, our space brothers who are up there and watching over us, and I have a lot of sources who say that they're up there, they would either stop it, or if for whatever the reason they said, nah, you humans have to try to stop it on your own, we're not going to help you, no worries, we'll use our death ray technology to dustify the asteroid. So I cannot imagine that any doomsday asteroid would ever be able to actually hit the Earth, given those reasons. But I'm digressing. Let's get back to ancient Egypt related stuff. And,
Oh, you reminded me of something very interesting.
yes.
The planet Jupiter, which is always said is a beneficial a benefactor, it's a beneficial planet. It actually absorbs a lot of the asteroids that were supposed to hit us. It absorbs it in their gravitational force, and it never comes here. So that's kind of a natural protection. Is the planet Jupiter for us?
Yes, of course, by the same token, if Jupiter's in the wrong place, it could fling an asteroid in our direction, but the odds of that happening, given the position of the Earth in the asteroid belt and Jupiter, means that Jupiter's going to save us from far more asteroids than it possibly could send asteroids to us. Um, anyhow, moving on to some other subjects here. Egypt perfume bottles, big motif on your site here. You have several different for sale, and when it comes to women using perfume and men using cologne, I I mean, is it really should it really be a sin if we really want to get back to our natural ways? Should we, dare I say it, stop using deodorant, stop using perfume, get used to the fact that that's the way nature has to run its course, and if you smell bad, well, be proud about it because it's a sign you're a unique form of nature. You should be ashamed of yourself that you're ashamed of your bad scent and you're trying to spray perfume on yourself or cologne on yourself to get rid of that. Well, some people don't look at it that way. Some people have artistic reasons for wanting to spray perfume or cologne on them. It has nothing to do with them being ashamed of how bad they smell. So, what's the big deal with the perfume? And did the Egyptians have their own perfume concoctions? And if so, what were they made of?
Absolutely. They certainly did. Well, they were essential oils. They weren't perfume like we have today with the alcohol. And those bottles actually are for essential oils. They have a little stick in them. So if you use them with essential oils, it's a very good applicator. And the Egyptians looked at it as glorifying the body, their jewelry, their makeup, everything. I mean, what was to glorify the physical body. If you look at their paintings and you look at the way they're adorned, they're this is the way that they took care of themselves, and they saw that as extremely important. Um, as far as someone being ashamed or not ashamed, that's a personal decision. But the Egyptians, as a people, I mean, they brushed their teeth. They're very, very clean. They came out with the first toothpaste. They also came out with the first beer that we know of in this time. So they were very interested in music. They were very interested in dance. They were very interested in the beautification of the body and taking care of oneself. So this is just culturally who they were. Some people are into that and some people aren't, but the Egyptians definitely were.
Yes, and what else is there on your site worth talking about? Okay, events. I haven't had a chance to look at this, but I seem to recall seeing something that you take people down to Egypt every so often for tours and all. I actually saw something on the site that said tour with John Anthony West, and it was dated March 20th, 2020. Okay, he's been dead for several months now, so I'm assuming that.
That's a post. That's a repost. I just happen to like a lot of the things that he has said, and I think that his knowledge, if I can continue to spread it, then so much the better.
Right, definitely. But as far as when you go down to Egypt, going a tour of Egypt is one of those things where a week or even 2 weeks down in Egypt is not enough. It's kind of a waste, they say. Um, there's so much there from a like the center of the Earth perspective. I mean, it's near the Mediterranean, which means middle of the Earth for its great importance in antiquity, that area of the world. And I mean, the pyramids are said to be on the geographical landmass center of all the landmass of the Earth. Um, that, among other reasons, is why if you're going to take a tour down to Egypt, you're only kidding yourself if you don't make it at least 2.5 weeks long. Is there generally a consensus rule on that, or are there some Egyptian tours that you know of that people can go on that are less than that that actually do manage to get a lot of things in? So even if it's less than 2.5 weeks, it's not really a waste.
I think if you really want to experience Egypt, that you're going to have to spend at least 2 weeks because you're looking at the Cairo Heliopolis section and you're also looking at Luxor. There's a lot to see. You're going to be overwhelmed with everything that you see, and there's a huge culture shock. I mean, the first thing is it's so old, it's so different. And when you drive around the country, you're going to see things that we in America here never see. We don't see people washing their dishes in the river while the animals are drinking water. We don't go to towns where there's no concrete and no asphalt. You're going to see things that just are like, wow. And you're going to stop and think about yourself, your life, and where you are. Also, Egypt has had every religion and every type of person in there. I mean, they've had the Soviet Union when they were the United Arab Republic under Nasser. They've had the French. They've had the English. They've had Muslims. They've had Christians. You're going to just be overwhelmed with everything and everyone that's there. I mean, there's beautiful Coptic churches. There's mosques. It's not just the Egyptian things from ancient Egypt. It's everything else and everyone else that came there and put their little something. So I would say less than you have to spend some time there, and if you can't do it economically in a hotel or whatever, you have to find accommodations. Or I mean, now with the Skype and this, that, and the other thing, you can find friends over there or switch apartments, switch houses, so that you can stay there for a while. When all this nightmare is over with this disease, I mean, I'm sure that you can find a family from Egypt that wants to come here, and you go there so you're not killed with hotel bills.
Yeah, what's the state of Cairo? I remember hearing. I was a big geography buff as a kid. Cairo was the biggest city in Africa in terms of population. Is that still the case?
Probably. Probably. It's very modern, and oh God, the way they drive. I wouldn't suggest driving in Cairo. I would suggest that you take a taxi or find a friend real fast because it makes driving in Italy and France look like child's play. The Egyptians are very unique in their changing lanes and getting over another. And what's amazing is that they don't have accidents. They know how to do that. It just scared me to death.
Okay. Oh yes, another Egyptian motif that I haven't talked about in this interview, the cobra. Very popular animal uh, throughout ancient Egypt, it seems, and the headdress of the pharaohs, most recognizable, the one on King Tut. Uh, that is said to be like a cobra's mane. The part of this cobras are known for having that wide, like mane of sorts of skin around their head, and that's what that is. And some documentaries have asserted that the cobra is the most dangerous snake. Where are they basing that on? The potency of its venom? Well, no, they can't be. There's other snakes that have more potent venom than the cobra, I believe. But maybe the cobra, if its aggressive behavior, um, is I guess the best way to determine which snakes are the most dangerous. Put a snake and a mongoose in a pit together. The mongoose is said to always win, but the snake that gives the mongoose the biggest run for its money would be the cobra. So maybe they're making that assertion there. But that plus its relatively high venom potency makes it such a dangerous animal. But you can see snake charmers like blowing flutes around snakes and maybe even kissing the snakes, and you wonder what exactly do these people have and what are they doing that's keeping the snake at bay to the point where the snake will make eye contact with the person but not want to bite the person. What's their secret? How do they do that? So this stuff the snake charmers do and why the cobra is so significant. Anything about that you can offer?
Well, the snake charmers, how they get away with that is when they pop the lid up, it takes a while for the cobras to adjust their eyesight. Their eyesight does not adjust to light as quickly as the audience, is waiting. So by the time that they can actually see, the snake charmer has done their little thing and whatever. They are a very aggressive animal in a protective sense, and that's why they were on the headdresses. They were there to protect the pharaoh. They were considered the goddess Wuja, which was part of Ra's eye. It was a protection amulet. To protect the pharaoh, and it was also the protection of Ra, because it was Ra's eye. The way that they had arranged it, if there were two, one protected Upper Egypt and one protected Lower Egypt. So when you look at the crowns of the different pharaohs, you can tell if Egypt was united under them or not united. If it was united, then they had two cobras, one representing Upper Egypt, one representing Lower Egypt. So those headdresses kind of gave you an idea of the time period and what was going on politically.
Right. Oh, yes, you did mention those crowns that they wear on their heads. Some I've heard of, like the white ones represent Upper Egypt, the red ones represent Lower Egypt. I believe that was a color representation. Also, regarding what you see on the top of those hats, looks like some sort of like a fruit shaped or like an object. Some say it's a button, but the late indigenous Egyptian wisdom keeper Hakim Iwan, who showed up prominently in the Pyramid Code documentary, he asserts that that thing is not a button at the top of the hat, it's a gland. And he said the ancient Egyptians knew all about the powers of the glands and what the glands can do for the body. If we knew how to harness their abilities more, they could actually do great things for us, for our bodies, that, well, they otherwise could do if we just keep not really paid attention to them and kept them dormant. So this idea that the hats have glands on them and there's gland motifs around Egypt, and the ancient Egyptians knew the power of the different glands throughout the body. Any comment on that?
Not really. I don't really have a comment on that. As I said, I kind of look at their principles and their principles for living life. And as far as their way of getting things done in the magical tradition would be, the focus, the willpower, the action, the laws of correspondence, vibration. That was part of the reason why Akhenaten even kept that when he went to one god. He still went out in front of all of the people with Nefertiti and worshiped that one god, and they all directed, the people came out to watch him do this every morning, and they all directed their energy to the fact that that one god, which was the sun, was going to protect them. So he was still pulling all of their energy to the fact that they were going to be protected, and the sun was going to rise when it was supposed to, and the river was going to rise when it was supposed to. So these are the kind of things that I look at when I look at what they've done, because these are the kind of things we can use today. If they invented something, a hat with a gland or whatever, I mean, I don't have enough knowledge to use it today. But the things that I can use, like their direction of energy and their principles of rhythm, their principles of polarity, I'm very interested in. And there's some of the things that I speak about when I do the lectures at the stores. I get more in depth into actually using these principles in your everyday life and using them to make your life better, and also not to make mistakes, because sometimes not being aware of a principle, especially one like gravity, because gravity doesn't care if you know about it or not. If you walk off a cliff, you're going to fall. And these hermetic principles pretty much work the same way. It doesn't matter if you know about them or not. If you don't, you're going to get bit in the butt. And if you do, you can use them to your advantage.
Right. And regarding, excuse me, the Hermetic principles, um, the god Tahote, and I didn't say Thoth. Some people have told me it's actually pronounced Tahote because there is no TH sound, Thoth, in the Egyptian language. He's the god who's well known for them. And it seems like for that reason, Tahote would be the god that, out of all the gods where you don't really know whether or not they did exist or not, Tahote, well, he's the one that would be the most likely to have definitely existed because, well, otherwise they wouldn't be given so much credit and glory for having bestowed the seven hermetic principles and the emerald tablets on humanity. Um, Now, Tehote, they say in that case, because of the Hermetic principle thing, he and the Egyptian god Hermes and the Roman god Mercury would definitely be one and the same entity. And
Absolutely.
okay, you say absolutely. So, do you want to touch on that a little further?
Well, I had spoken about the creator gods and then the gods that like Isis and Osiris that are in the lower pantheon. Thoth is one of the creator gods. He's actually self-created and he mediates chaos and order. He was created right around the time that Sekhmet was created, and he's wisdom and knowledge, and he's like the first tier that Ra created with Sekhmet, Shu, and Tefnut. His teachings teach us how to use all these things that are here, and that's basically what it is. It's a roadmap. It's saying that if you do this, this will happen. If you do this, that. If you do that, that will happen. He's giving us the tools to make this world be an incredible world, and he's telling us if we use them to do that, we can do that. If we use them in a negative way, or we use them in a way that they're not meant to be used, there's going to be bad results. And so his teachings are extremely important, and they're really the core of knowledge that was the mystery schools.
Thank you. And regarding Tehote being a scribe or a messenger, that would resonate with Hermes, Mercury being messenger of the gods in Greco-Roman lore. So yeah, there's a nice connection there. And the founding fathers were said to strongly believe in the Hermetic principles regarding their work in trying to found this nation. But I guess that would probably go out of your area of work. But the creation stories of Egypt, I keep confusing. Is it Zeb-Tepi or Tep-Zepi? What the time period where they say civilization was started according to Egyptian lords? Is it Zeb-Tepi or Tep-Zepi?
It's neither. It's the noon, which is a primeval water, a water of shallows and darkness. It's stormy, and this chaos that existed before order. So this chaos existed in an infinite realm of time, and then from that, a mound emerged, which was order, and that's Aman. From Aman, everything else was created. So Nun can't be created because Nun just was.
Okay. Sorry, I was on mute and I didn't realize that. Okay, so well, you say it's neither, but I just typed in Tep-Zepi into a search engine and I'm seeing different search results. Some saying Tep-Zepi, some saying Zeb-Tepi. It's like they've also confused it. So, but why are you saying it's neither? I'm confused about why you would not, because you watch
No,
Egyptian
I said
documentaries.
no. I said it's neither about a time. Neither about a time.
Okay.
That Nun means the primeval waters, the waters of chaos. In the beginning, there was nothing but chaos. The first emergence of order comes with Amun Ra, and that's what I was saying is that there was infinite chaos that existed always, forever, and Amun Ra was the first emergence of order. Now, chaos still exists in the Egyptian story of creation because there is a little thing called Epep, which also is a snake, but it's more like a dragon snake. And Epep is a reminder that even though the world is functioning on order, the chaos is always going to be a part of it because chaos and order go together to create our world.
Okay, thank you. All right, one of the since we're a little pressed on time here, I don't think we talked about this earlier in the interview, but it's on one of the papers that you gave out at the Bucks County event, Magic and Mystery of Ancient Egypt, Part 1, Intro to Ancient Egypt, and Part 11, Hika, Magic. I don't seem to recall the word Hika ever mentioned being mentioned
Heka,
to you in this.
Heka,
Yeah, I don't
Heka.
think you mentioned that earlier in this. So what is Heka and how does it
Well,
work?
there's two types. One is the Heka of the people, the common magic that the people in the society would practice. That's your protection amulets. That's your oils and incense to attract. All of the mundane, everyday things. I need money. I need love. I need this. I need that. And then the higher magic is what I'm talking about. Higher Heka would be what the priest class practice, which are the principles of the Hermetic principles, and also the dietary, the lifestyle. And with diet, you're not just talking about what you put in your mouth. You're talking about what you put in your brain, what you put in your nose, what you put in, in your ears. It's like, what kind of things are you bringing into your body? So the idea that they had to have a very, very pure vessel to be able to receive instructions from the gods. And that's the higher magic. That's where the whole goal is the creation of the new you. It's the creation of the magician. The lower Heka, the lower magic is just every day, I need this. And someone that purchased a protection amulet or someone that purchased a money amulet didn't need to purify anything. They didn't need to change their life.
Thank you. And regarding these protection amulets, I hear you mention that. It makes me think of what I've been doing ever since the start of Mercury retrograde. I've been retooling my life in an interesting way. After I saw a thing on my credit card statement saying spend $1,000 in money on this credit card, get extra airline miles, I thought, well, as long as I buy things I know I'm going to use and all, maybe I might as well take advantage of this. And well, I'm not really buying things I definitely need, but taking advantage of that offer and also sacrificing yoga and Tai Chi to make some of this possible. I am buying a lot of amulets and crystals that are very specific for my Aries zodiac sign. And knowing that the ancient Egyptians were very big on metaphysical abilities and whatnot, they were very spiritual people. I would have to wonder, would they support or shun this? I mean, one could make the argument we're all infinite consciousness. You don't need all these crutches. Some people say crutches is a harsh word. You should use a more appropriate word like tool. Think of these talismans and amulets and crystals and gemstones as tools to help you on your spiritual awakening. But in the end, you really shouldn't have to need them, because if we're all infinite consciousness, you have the ability to harness the abilities of these crystals and gemstones. Then again, I argue we're still stuck in a matrix where our consciousness is suppressed. Therefore, it makes sense for me to get these things, and whatever my horoscope says, this is the crystal you should carry on this specific day, then by all means, I'm going to start doing that a little bit more often. But my big question is, would the ancient Egyptians, and for that matter, any metaphysically advanced society, make the assertion that at some point or another, I should get out of the habit of not using crystals and gemstones and things like that anymore? Because, well, like I said, we're all infinite consciousness. You should, in theory, if you're in control of your consciousness enough, be able to not use them anymore. Just like how you should eventually discipline yourself to not use drugs anymore to get high. You should be able to get high on sobriety and life at some point in your life. Would the same be true with other tools like talismans and crystals? What would the ancient Egyptians say?
Well, certain tools, you're using them to focus your mind, and until you're able to focus your mind at will and get the results that you want to get, then the tools are very good. Other things, you're like incense and oils, they're activating chemicals in your brain. When you smell them, you're actually, little neurons are going crazy, and they're doing something on their own. So there's two different kinds. The incense and the oils are actually activating things. And an amulet would be something that you're concentrating on. You're learning how to focus your attention and focus your mind. And really, at the end of the day, it is your mind. However, the last thing that should go is the incense and the oils, because that's making a physical change in your body that's helping you do the focus better. So it depends on what level you are with your mind. I mean, if you can sit there and make, your best friend call you right now, then throw all that junk out.
All right, but I've started to really like the look of all those crystals and gemstones.
Well, then keep them. If they're beautiful, then you keep them.
Yeah, right. So, all right, we've reached the 2-hour mark. So why don't you take this moment to get at anything you like, make one last sales pitch if there's anything you want to make a sales pitch about, your contact info, your site, your any events in the future, and we'll close out this fascinating interview that we had. I loved it very much. So let's close out.
Well, thank you so much. And this was fun. It was a lot of fun. And I'd just like to say, if anyone would like me to come out to their store, if they want to see the papyrus paintings up close and personal, and they want to play with some of the other artifacts from Egypt, I bring everything out with me. I pass it around and I tell the stories of the different objects. and I'm always happy to do that. So just contact me, and we can set up a date when we're allowed to get close together again, and we can make it happen. Thank you.